Okay, here we are on another fine day. I'm taking my time putting this together, like I said. And I've been putting out fires all morning here at the shop. I had to go do a house call this morning on that machine, that Throttle that's on my channel that I bought for that elderly couple that still runs their lawn service. And they had an employee that was working for him, and he left and went to South Carolina because he couldn't stay in his apartment or whatever. It's 55 and over community, and he could only be there for a month. Anyway, apparently when he parked it last week, he left the key on somehow, which is a little strange, but the battery was dead. So they brought the new employee out this morning, and he went to start it, and there was nothing. So I just took a battery up there real quick and swapped it and brought their battery back. It's on my charger now. They're a real nice couple, so I do little extra stuff like that for them. So where I'm at right now, again, I'm still waiting on this plate to come with its gasket and its filter. So as far as the top is concerned, I'm kind of stuck in a position now where I've gone ahead and put the tin back on. I put the stator back on, ran the stator wire out the side. That's ready to rock. But I can't put the flywheel on because the flywheel goes over the plate. So I've got to wait on that. I went ahead and put both heads on, and I set the valves. I set them at 5 thousandths. On this Kawasaki motor, the specs call for between 4 and 6 thousandths on both valves, intake and exhaust. So I just went in the middle and set all 4 at 5 thousandths. I rotated the motor a bunch of times, made sure everything was working, checked the valve settings again. We're good to go. This is our linkages for, this one goes to the carburetor. There's a spring on the bottom that goes to the governor. Made sure that all that was back in the right spot, and I could see on here the settings of where it was. That's why you saw me just adjust that just now, put that back where it was. That's important. This is adjustable because that's the spring on your governor, and it's also, this is where our choke cable and our throttle cable will connect here and here, and our linkage comes off the bottom here, it goes to the carburetor. There's another linkage that comes down. But I wanted to give you an update. Now what I'm going to be doing for the next hour or so is putting all the side tins back on. You don't need to watch me do that. But I'm going to be putting the side tins back on where they belong. I've got to remember exactly where they go, and of course I have all my nuts and bolts where they're supposed to be. So I'm going to put those back on. I'm going to put the oil filter on. I'm going to put the oil fill or oil drain back in. There's a plastic thing that screws in here. I'm going to hook up the starter, which is simple. 2 bolts, and the starter's on. And that goes on right over here. So I'm going to put the starter back on. And basically I'm going to put the carburetor back on. The intake manifold with the carburetor on it is going back on, and the exhaust as well, which goes on under here. I'm going to put all that back together. You don't need to see me do that, but I'm going to get this thing basically ready, and then later this afternoon I'm going to go and strap it back on the machine with the 4 mounting bolts. I'm not going to worry. I have to order a new pulley. Can't get them locally. So I'm not going to worry about getting it started today, but I'm going to get all my electrical plugs plugged back in, make sure everything's hooked up and ready to rock. So when I get this plate and gasket, I can put that together, fill it with oil, and hit the key and check compression. And I will check compression before I even try to start it. I want to make sure that the compression is good on both cylinders. So the next thing you're going to see is a quick update when everything's back on, and then we'll show it to you put back on the machine. Alright guys, moment of truth. I hope you can see that. I got most of the machine back together. What I could, I'll explain in a second. Let's get it back on here. goes. Just make sure you could have seen that. You saw it good enough. Alright, now I got the motor bolted back on. There's 4 bolts underneath. Sorry, I'm having issues with my tripod. There are 4 bolts that come in from underneath. One of them right is where my ground wires go. So I had to make sure I put both ground wires on there. I got my plug plugged back in. That's that little jobby right there, and it only goes in one way. I tested it both ways to be sure. It only goes in one way. I have my charging system hooked back up. That's what these wires, not this one, that's what these wires here are for, into the voltage regulator. The other wires that come up here across the top, these are the kill wires that go into the bottom of the magnetos. And I believe this wire goes to the bottom of the carburetor for the fuel solenoid shutoff. I, again, have to put this top cover back on, which means I have to take the carburetor rail off. But I put all that back together because it's easy. And I wanted to make sure that all my linkages on my carburetor were correct. My fuel pump was back on where it needed to be. My starter's back on. My oil dipstick oil fill is on. Right down there is my oil release for changing the oil. I got the oil filter on. I got all the linkages on. Last thing to do here is put my throttle and my choke levers on, and they go there. I have to check my pictures to make sure I put them in the right spot. And like I said, that goes down through here. And that goes... That's my power wire to my fuel cutoff. So that's back on. I got an air filter here, or an air overflow for fuel. I have a hose that comes off of here and goes up to the air breathing box with the filter in it. But basically at this point, as soon as I put my choke cables back on, my choke and my throttle over here where they belong, and then I get this oil plate and filter put back on, then I can put on my flywheel and my fan, and I can turn the motor over. So that's what I wanted. When that part comes here tomorrow or the next day, whenever it gets into the parts house, I will do that. And the next time you see this, we will be turning the key and checking compression on the new motor, filling it with oil, filling it with gas, and starting it up. Well, boys and girls, this is always the scariest moment. When you pull an entire engine apart and it's in every piece possible on your bench, and you put it back together, the scary part is, did you put everything back together right? Did you forget a bolt? Did you not tighten something? Was everything correct? So I thought you'd want to see that for the first time I'm putting oil back in this thing, since it's left my shelf, since it's left my work table. And I'm only putting in 1 quart now. It takes about 1.5 quarts to 1.75 quarts. I don't need to show you guys that. Just thought you'd want to see me putting the oil in. Everything's hooked up, and now I just want to hit that starter, and it's got no fuel. The fuel line's over here. It's not hooked up. There's no fuel in it. I put the magnetos back on. I put the flywheel back on. I put the new oil cover back. I put the new oil cover and seal on. And now I'm just going to spin it with the key. And make sure you're in frame. My cat is out here. I've been adopted. And let's just make sure it spins and I don't hear any weird clanking sounds or anything, huh? Hey, it might help if you took that out of your hand and put it where it belongs so you don't get squirted in the face with oil. I would say we're good. What do you say, just for giggles and shits? Do I have any fuel? Let me get a little fuel. Let's see if she'll fart. Okay, I just want to see if she'll cough and fart and burp. She should start for 5 or 10 seconds if I'm lucky. Let's see if it blows itself up. I don't think the kitty cat's gonna want to be here. Hey! Hey! We got a working motor. That's exactly what I was hoping it would do. It fired up for just long enough to fire up the fuel I shot it down the throat. Now there's no way to know whether both cylinders are working. Just because this is a dual intake. I shot it here. It could have sucked more to one side or the other. Who knows which side fired off first. But it sounds really good. No clanking, no braking, no nothing. And it started and it ran, and that's what I wanted. And our crank wobble is gone. There's no wobble whatsoever. So I'm not gonna come here, kitty. Come here. Hey. Hey. Now you want to run away because you don't like the sound of it. You come here. Hey. Okay. She's been at my feet like a puppy for the last 48 hours. Ever since she realized she could get me to pet her if she came sat in my lap. She's only about 8 weeks old. Hi, baby. Huh? You still gotta come to me, huh? You don't let me to come to you? Come here. Come here, silly. Say hi. Say hi. Hey. Say hi. Get them pets, huh? So, basically what's left is hooking up. Okay. Basically what's left is hooking up the fuel to the carburetor, which is just this, literally. I'm not putting the air box on right now because I do not have the pulley down on the bottom to drive it, and I don't have the PTO clutch on. I have to order the pulley for the drive system. So that's going to be a few days, but I could care less about that. This machine is in top-notch order. So as soon as I get the new pulley, that's good. So the fuel is hooked up. I need to take the fuel line here where I have it tucked in and just stick this on the fuel pump. Now the fuel pump's hooked up. The kill switches are working. All of that stuff should be good. All my grounds are in place because it started. My cutoff's good. All my linkages are good. The muffler's on. It sounds great. So really at this point the only thing left is for me to put the fan on the top here, which just sits in place, and then there's a series of bolts that holds that on. So yeah, I have to take the bolt back out of the flywheel because it goes through the fan, and then the other stuff goes on top of the fan, and these posts are what hold the top cover on. But I'm not interested in doing that right now. What I'm gonna do is yeah, I'm just gonna let this seal dry until tomorrow. Make sure it's got the correct amount of oil in it. Like you just saw me put 1 quart in, I'm gonna have to put in another half a quart or so. And I should be able to turn on the fuel and this thing should fire up. Oh, I still have to put on my my throttle and my choke, which is no big deal, and that way I can idle it up. And then I'm gonna let it run. I'm gonna let it run for about 15 minutes, and I'm gonna shut it off. I'm gonna check the oil, make sure that I don't see any shiny silvery bits in it. And also we have an oil filter on the side that's going to need to be filled up, so that'll fill itself up, so the oil will get a little bit low. And then I will check it every 15 minutes for an hour. Then we'll let it cool off, and I'll probably go ahead and drain the oil and see what the oil looks like. Every time you rebuild a motor, the new piston rings have to get worn into the cylinder. You know, you could find a little bit of metal flake in there. That's why you change it after an hour. Then I'll put in fresh oil, put on all the top covers, put on the air box, and then run it for 3 to 4 hours. And check the oil again and make sure that we're good. In the meantime, there's no adjustments that need to be made. Everything is on and good. The valves are set. I mean, literally everything is good to go. So I may make a quick 1-minute update at the end after I've changed the oil after an hour and run it for 3 or 4 hours and show you I'm driving it around when I put the new pulleys on the bottom. But that's it. That's how you start. That's how you rebuild a motor. And we originally started off with crank wobble, which was making the oil come out of the top and all down the sides. And you know, we had problems with this oil plate and filter inside, and thankfully we were able to get a new bushing in there, take care of the crank wobble, and we're back in business. I am thoroughly highly excited. So if I don't make a finish to this, thank you so much for watching. I call this a big win. I appreciate it. Okay, I'm excited. I couldn't help myself. I can't help myself, I should say. So I just want to run it for a minute. I've got my choke and my throttle hooked up. The fuel line's hooked up. Now the fuel line is completely empty, so it's going to take a minute to get into the machine to start. But I'm going to put it on choke. I'm going to hit the key. If I get it to start, I'm going to try throttling it up and down and just see how it sounds. I know it's going to take a minute to get fuel from the fuel pump to fill up the bowl of the carburetor and then into the intake. So maybe I'll prime it a little and just see. Turn the choke off. Give it a little prime. Say that's Kelly for the win. Boy, that thing sounds freaking good. Now if you're concerned about why it's smoking, you know, I had this whole thing out on my shop. Clearly you've watched the videos. I did not, however, do anything with the muffler, and when this thing was just pouring oil out of everywhere, oil got all over the muffler as well. Now the only oil that's to do with this machine now is on the inside, because before I put it back together, I pressure washed it. I washed it down with some mineral spirits to make sure there was no oil anywhere. There is also a little bit of oil on the starter. I had to spray the starter with fuel again today to clean it because it has oil in the pads, but I got it to work. So if you see oil coming off of it, it's most likely on the muffler, and after 30 seconds of that, or so, a couple of minutes I should say, whatever oil film might be on the muffler, which I can see it, will get hot and burn off. Other than that, oh my God, this thing sounds amazeballs. So I might have to clean the carburetor. When I hit the throttle, it wanted to hesitate for a second before going up. But again, I literally washed the carburetor right before I put the rail and the carburetor back on with soap and water. It probably had a little bit of water in there. I need to drop the bowl, spray it out, put it back together. But oh my God, Kelly for the win, baby. We were looking at a $2,500 motor new or finding something used that would fit on commercial for an affordable price. And instead we were able to pull this thing apart, change that bushing, get rid of the crank wobble, you know, the worn bearing, the worn bushing on the top, put everything back together. And you know, we went ahead and put the new magnetos on it, and we put new rings on and all new seals, and new as much as everything we could. Off camera, I think I lost that footage. I actually lapped the valves as well, but the heads were in great shape. I didn't see much reason to do it, but I went ahead and lapped them while I had it apart. It only takes a few minutes. This thing is so smooth and quiet and beautiful. So I'm gonna call this a win. I'm gonna clean up what's left of my tools, put my tripods away, and it's only like 4 o'clock, which never happens for me. And I'm gonna have a damn beer because this is a total win. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this helped you guys realize that it may be scary to think to take apart a motor and have to rebuild it. But if I can do it, and I'm just a monkey with a wrench, you could do it too. So I'll give you an update in a week or so. We'll post that as a separate video and let you know that everything's good when I cut the grass with it for the first time. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Well, kids, just wanted to give you an update. This is the motor that we rebuilt on this Gravely, the Kawasaki 15.5. I started it, but I did not put the upper fan on and the shroud. And I ran it for 15 minutes and it was smoking like a chimney. Not out of the muffler, so it wasn't from the rings trying to seat themselves or blow by. It was because there was still some oil film on the machine itself. And that concerned me a little. So I actually took the flywheel back off, took the magnetos back off, and I checked the entire upper end of that machine, and it was bone dry. But it was so hot that my beads of sweat were dripping on it and sizzling like bacon. So after 15 minutes, I turned it back off. I let it cool off for about an hour till I could touch it. I put the flywheel back on, the magnetos back on, and this time I put the cooling fan and the shroud back on. You would not believe how much air that fan pushes. It hits the shroud and goes right down all 4 sides of that motor. And that air keeps it cool. It's actually cool to the touch. I put my fingers on it after another 5 minutes of running, and it's not even warm to the touch. So we're running it now. It's been about 30 minutes this time, and it is just beautiful. It sounds so smooth. It's running perfectly without a skip or a jump. There is 0 issues with this thing so far. The only thing that's left to put on it would be the top grill, a few bolts in the shroud. I'm going to clean up the shroud, probably put a new sticker on it, and put the air box back on. But I also have to adjust the throttle. I think it's out just a little bit too far. But when you're running an engine after a rebuild, for the first hour, run it at low speed idle. Now twice, I kicked up to high RPMs just to make sure it sounded good, brought it right back down. But when you put new rings in a motor and you rebuild it, you have to give it time for everything to seat itself, to find itself. After 15 minutes, I checked the oil. Then I ran it for another 15 minutes, checked the oil again. And now it's been running. This will be a total of 45 minutes it's been running. Then I'm going to shut it off for the night because it's about to storm. Cover it over, and tomorrow after work, I have to cut lawns tomorrow, I will then run it for 1 hour. Check the oil, start it up, let it run for 1 hour at low RPMs. That'll be 1 hour and 45 minutes on the new motor at low RPMs. Then I will run it up when I get the pulley on it. Then I will run it at high RPMs, and I'll drive it around for about an hour. Check the oil again, change the oil. But it's just magnificent. It sounds so good. It looks great. It's not smoking, it's not leaking. So we took care of the oil leak and the crank wobble. and this thing's ready to put in another, you know, 1,000, 1,500 hours. So I just wanted to give you guys an update and let you know that this was a complete success, and I'm going to use it a little bit. I've got a few buyers on the line, but you know how that is. So we'll see what happens. But thanks for watching the channel. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys soon.